Thank you, Bill. Hey, everybody. I have spent the last 25 years of my career working on innovation. So my focus has been on tip of the spear, looking at what's coming over the next horizon and how we can integrate that into our businesses. That just happens to be AI right now. And I'm sure there will be something that's coming next, even though that's not what the executives want you to think. So today we're here to talk about what I'm calling the art of the current, navigating the future of AI. But before we do that, I'd like to do a little experiment here. I'm going to show you a series of pictures like this one, and I want you to tell me simply by shouting out if it is a chair or not a chair. Does everyone feel like they have the expertise to handle this exercise? Yeah, we're good? Nobody cried or had to lay down, so I'm thinking we're okay. All right, here we go. Ready? Chair or not a chair? Chair. Okay, that one was easy. It's a chair. Chair or not a chair? Chair. Chair. I love it. We're unified. Perfect. Chair or not a chair? Ooh, derision. Murmuring. No? What do we think? Chair or not a chair? I'm hearing some chairs. I'm hearing not a chair. For anybody that said not a chair, why is it not a chair? It's a stool? What makes it a stool? 3 legs. Okay? No back and 3 legs. Not a chair. Good to know. How about this? Pete apparently has some of these in his room, so we could go check them out later. Do a little experimentation. Is this a chair? My cat certainly thinks this is a chair. Chair? Okay. Even though no legs, still a chair? Interesting. Okay. All right. What about this? That is a yoga ball on 4 legs. Is that a chair? Chair. Wow, pretty unified. Chair. Why is this a chair? No back, but you can sit on it, and it has 4 legs. So it's a chair. Correct? Okay. Then is a horse a chair? It's got 4 legs and you can sit on it. Not a chair? Not a chair. Pretty unified. Why is it not a chair? Because it's alive, right? Okay, so chair can't be alive. Got it. Following now. How about this? This is an art installation some of you may have seen. You're actually not allowed to sit on these. Is this a chair? That is a chair. Okay, interesting. And what if I told you that all of the images that I have shown you here are AI generated? Does that change any of your answers? At the beginning of this exercise, everyone in this room had a tremendous amount of confidence in their ability to determine what was and wasn't a chair. And yet, when we got into it, it wasn't that simple. What does define a chair, apart from the fact that you can sit on it? Does it need a back or arms to be a chair? What number or configuration of legs makes something a chair? Does intent matter? Is something a chair because it was manufactured to be a chair, or because someone is using it as a chair? In 2017, the engineer John Salvatierre wrote an essay titled "Reality Has a Surprising Amount of Detail." And in it, he made the argument that the gap between how simple something seems from a distance and how complex it actually is up close is not a quirk, but a fundamental aspect of our shared reality. The example that he used in his essay was the boiling point of water. So you may have heard science tell us that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, but there are a lot of factors that go into that. The purity of the water itself, the container, whether it's metal or glass that you're boiling it in. If you salt your water, that raises the boiling point. And even the altitude at which you are standing can have an effect. So, does water boil at 100 degrees Celsius? Sometimes, yeah, exactly. Is it easy to define what is and isn't a chair? Not always, right? That brings me to a river in Washington State. Stay with me. In 1913, someone had the genius idea to build a series of dams on the Elwha River in Olympic National Park. The salmon, who had been using this river for considerably longer than anyone involved in that decision, were unfortunately not consulted. In 2012, the decision was made to take the dams back down. And the engineers that were involved in the project were convinced that it would take the river decades to recover. However, that is not what happened. When they removed the dams, the river returned to its original channel within hours. Yeah, less than 24 hours, and the river remembered. And after a century of being absent, within just 2 years, the salmon returned as well. Because you see, the river didn't need a multi-step strategic framework for recovery. It just needed the obstructions removed. And the reason I tell you this is because this is the story that I think of when I hear about organizations who have spent millions of dollars on AI, only to turn around and realize they have no return on their investment to report. And I think that is what is happening in the majority of enterprise organizations these days. They've purchased the AI licenses, thousands of them in some cases. They have executive buy-in. There's a rollout plan, maybe a snazzy acronym to go with it. But the employees are not using the tools, or at least not to an extent where we can show any kind of real value. That is the exact problem that a Fortune 100 company came to us with last year. They had handed out Copilot licenses to their entire team. They had given them access to Skillsoft training for independent learning purposes. And they'd held lunch and learns, which were fairly well attended. But the employees did not have the bandwidth to explore. And the ones that did felt completely overwhelmed and didn't know where to start. And so that's when we knew we needed to do something completely different. Because you see, what our client had discovered, and I think what the majority of the industry is now discovering, is that when you roll out your shiny new AI tool, that's when reality hits. The work streams are messier than expected, the resistance more nuanced than anticipated. And rather than creating a natural channel through which AI can flow into pre-existing work streams, they had created a dam, leaving their employees paralyzed. So we knew we needed to throw out the traditional training playbook and go together with an altogether new approach, one born out of our own AI discovery workshops with clients. In 1991, John Cleese of Monty Python fame gave a speech to the Video Arts Organization on the nature of creativity. And as Kevin mentioned this morning, he made the assertion that creativity is not a talent, but a way of operating. And we used this key insight as the basis for our new approach, one where we hoped to get employees motivated and excited about this new technology. And I think it's important to remember that that is exactly what this is, a brand new technology. This is not your standard change management. This is not a migration from one platform to another. This is not a lift and shift of pre-existing skills of our employees. This is a transformation of the way we do business, on par with the advent of the internet itself. In his speech, John Cleese references the work of psychologist Donald McKinnon, who did his research in Berkeley in the 1960s. He looked at architects, engineers, and scientists in order to determine what separated the most creative ones from their peers. And the answer was interesting. It had nothing to do with IQ. The most creative of the bunch were not any smarter than their colleagues. They simply had created a faculty for getting themselves into a space where their natural creativity could flow. Cleese called this the open mode. He said that the open mode requires 4 things: space, time, confidence, and humor. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. What happens when AI rolls into most organizations? Does leadership create space for the discomfort of not knowing? Do they give employees the time needed to explore without restraint? Do they say, just play with it, you can't hurt anything? No, almost never. In fact, they create a dam. Not because they mean to, but because urgency, compliance requirements, and timelines for rollouts are all obstructions that keep AI from finding its natural place within our organizations. They hold the current behind a wall, and they wonder why nothing is flowing. Now, the closed mode is not the enemy. We need it. The closed mode is purposeful, it is focused, and it requires regimented thinking because that is the mode in which most work gets done. For instance, some of you probably have seen that we have some great trails out here that you can hike. If you were about to leap over a ravine, the moment before you jump is probably not the best moment to consider your options, right? So the closed mode is not the problem. The problem is that's where most organizations get stuck. And that was reflected in what we were hearing from employees time and time again, that there was no space, no time, no permission to just relax and get comfortable with AI. Now, the most effective people are not the ones who live in the open mode or the closed mode. They're the ones who can switch between them. The ones who have adopted an experimental mindset, who are not focused on right choices or wrong choices, but rather on outcomes alone. Open mode to explore, closed mode to build. Open mode to assess, closed mode to scale. Back and forth. There is a rhythm to it, a flow, not unlike a current. And that is what we are telling our clients. Don't rush to the pilot. Sit in the open mode first. Let the use cases flow from the individuals who are doing the actual work. Then switch and build. The organizations who can't make this switch, the ones that are stuck behind the dam, are strangling creativity with urgency. Now, permission to play is not a mindset. It is not a strategic framework. It is an organizational condition. And Cleese put it simply when he said, the nature of true play is experimentation. And being open to playfulness means being open to the potential for any outcome to happen. You are either free to play or you are not. And I believe this is what is missing from the majority of AI enablement programs: permission to play. Because people are afraid. People are afraid of breaking something. People are afraid of looking stupid. People are afraid of being replaced. And fear is a dam through which nothing can flow. As Brené Brown so famously said, clarity is kindness. So before we wrote a single line of curriculum, we listened. We held strategic discovery sessions across the entire department, speaking to everyone from super users who were already building their own custom agents to individuals who had yet to even open the tool. Where's Mahoney? I'm pointing you out. And what we heard was not a lack of interest. It was a lack of clarity. The individuals we talked to said that they had had bad experiences with AI in the past. Some felt that the training that they had received was not always relevant to their role, and that the messaging they were receiving from leadership was constantly shifting. And no one had just asked them what it was that they needed. And so that's where we started. with the people, not the platform. We began by addressing employees' hopes and fears first, not in a survey, but in a conversation. Because when you let people say out loud, I am terrified that AI is going to take my job, or I am completely overwhelmed, I feel like I'm behind and I'm never going to catch up, that's when the real conversation starts. And that is how we built trust. Next, we had in-person workshops, 10 sessions over 4 days in 2 locations with 150 individuals trained. But again, not on a traditional curriculum. We were focused on creating motivation and excitement about this new technology because we knew we couldn't possibly make everyone an expert in one session. We instead focused on creating a space for those employees to experience the open mode of creativity. A time to build awareness and confidence. We wanted employees to see Copilot as a practical and accessible tool that they could utilize for acceleration of their everyday tasks, not an overwhelming technology that took a tremendous amount of effort to understand. Everybody wanted to learn. That was never the problem. However, what we unearthed in both our discovery sessions and our in-person workshops was that every employee's experience was unique. Some needed fundamental prompting techniques, others were ready for more advanced capabilities. Their learning paces varied widely, and role-specific questions dominated nearly every conversation. Same organization, same department, same chair, completely different universes. And with the technology excelling at an absolutely breakneck pace, and curriculum only really representing a single moment in time, we asked ourselves, what would it look like for every employee to have their own learning partner? One that would evolve with them and the technology. Our solution? An orchestrated, agentic learning framework that we called the Capability Squad. Shout out to Lee for coming up with the name. At the center, we had Kai, the learning coach. Kai was the only agent in the squad that was employee-facing. Employees could chat with Kai about their learning goals, their preferred modality for learning, if they preferred podcasts or videos or facilitated courses, and the time that they had to dedicate to the task. In turn, Kai got curious and asked them questions about what AI capabilities they were already comfortable with and what were the work streams that they were looking to accelerate, and retained this information. Kai was not a chatbot bolted onto a course catalog. It was a thoughtful learning partner that walked with employees through every step of their journey. Behind Kai, we created a series of agents who were invisible to employees utilizing the system, but kept the engine up to date. Scout went out on the internet and found applicable learning modules from authoritative sources. Lex categorized those learning courses for addition to the catalog so that Kai had access to them. And Archie acted as our proxy, as the curriculum architect, designing bridge modules when new technology came on the scene. These agents work together in the background to keep the engine current so that Kai always had relevant content to recommend. And then there was Clyde. Every organization needs QA, and Clyde was our Red Hat agent, asking the difficult questions. Is this learning module appropriate for the audience it's tagged for? Are there redundancies in the course catalog that are creating confusion? Are there things we need to add that are new onto the market? Clyde asked the difficult questions and kept the engine honest. We built 5 agents because static curriculum cannot possibly keep up with the breakneck pace at which AI is accelerating. What is relevant today could be outdated in a matter of weeks. This system meant that our customer owned their own orchestrated agentic learning framework that evolved independently without having to meet with us every 6 months to write new training content. That is the difference between a project and an asset. Every agent in the capability squad shared the same foundational training data, and everything we heard by listening to employees and everything that we wrote to meet those employees where they were at became the intelligence layer, orchestrating the entire agentic framework. Listen, educate, activate. That is the rhythm of the current. And here is what that rhythm produced for our client. 100% adoption. No joke. This was not a mandate. This was not a tracked metric with consequences attached to it. This was pure organic utilization. Because when you do the discovery work right, something interesting happens. The use cases go from being a backlog to a roadmap, showing you what employees need now, next, and in the future. The Elwha River, which from a distance looks like a simple, thin blue line on a map, we now know is something far more alive. A chair looks simple until you try to define it. AI looks easy until you try to implement and scale. The organizations who are getting this right are not the ones who are moving the fastest. They're the ones who have learned to trust the art of the current. Thank you. Glad I brought this. Thank you.
I'm going to ask for a few audience comments before we come back to you for questions. So Paula and Shanita, I'm going to pick on you two next. Very interested, running a technology organization, obviously enablement of your employees, choice of tools. What is your perspective on it?
So it's actually, can you hear me? It's actually somewhat interesting. What we just heard too, we've had to step out for a couple of calls.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, but it's all around what you're talking about, right? And,
Sure.
and use cases and listening to the customers up front. And I think part of it, I think somewhat we've done well, right? As far as listening to the customers and implementing what their needs are. But I think the constant flow, the river goes on.
It does.
Right?
Yes.
Even once there's the implementation, what you need to keep listening to the customers and keep communicating to who those are. So I think that's a lesson as well. And then the broader scope too, identifying who everybody is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, we're an organization within a larger agency, so we have our customers, which are our programs, and then of course the end users, which are New Mexican citizens in general. So the depth of the waters as well.
Absolutely.
So.
And thank you for keeping the analogy going.
Well, the notes that I took that just really resonated with me is it's the difference between a project and an asset. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my role is really project focused, but that is a little bit of a mind switch. Like, I don't want it just to be a project that ends. I want it to be an asset that helps New Mexicans live their best lives.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Matt Payne, I warned you I'm coming to you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a river analogy here. It's more
Not
of a,
required.
It's more of a carrot and a stick, right? You mentioned organizations are spending millions and millions of dollars on tools and technologies. Obviously, you talked about some of the coaching aspect and bringing people up from a capability perspective. But what about from a mindset perspective? You know, we hear this a lot from our customers. You know, you won't lose your job as a result of AI, but if you don't use the tools, you may lose your job. That's one approach.
Sure.
But what do you think? What is your thoughts on what is the best way to get, at an enterprise level, people to rally and use these things organically once they have been given the tools and the capabilities? Because I think there can be a disconnect there. And then, what do you do with those fish that don't swim down the river?
There you go. You did it.
There you go.
Nice work. So I think one of the most difficult parts of change management, especially when it comes to technology adoption, is for people to feel like they're part of the process, right? The thing that we're hearing in the news about failed AI enablement programs are employees who feel like AI is being shoved down their throats. Against their will. And so they're very reticent to be against it and push back. But if you involve them in the original R&D, if you have them learning the tools and then coming to you with those use cases, then seeing those come to fruition, they're going to turn around and become cheerleaders for the technology rather than resistors, right? And I think that when we allow people to feel enabled, they also feel safer. So now I understand the technology, I understand the pitfalls, and now I can be a part of this evolution and I feel like an innovator. I think the piece of that puzzle that we need to look at next is then how we enable leadership to make people feel that way and to vet or greenlight these use cases as they become available. I think another piece of the puzzle is enabling leaders to understand how to talk to engineers about the development of AI use cases so that the engineers are speaking the same language as the business requirements, and that's going to lead to overall success for everyone involved. Great question.
Actually build on that part of the thing that you were talking about, communicating. So Louise, in the back, I mean, this is, if you think about communicating out, so strategic communications for Louise, communicating out to hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of employees. This is probably one of the more significant changes in their lives. How does that affect what you're thinking you're communicating out to your employee population?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think, it's hard in an organization that's super matrix and has a ton of different roles. So we've taken the approach to really figure out where can we optimize it. And I think to your point, Jen, it's really about helping them see the value for them.
Yes.
And not in, hey, you have to do this, but if you do this, this is how it's going to improve X, Y, and Z. So trying to make that connection as to, it's not just a technology, it's a value add to them as an individual. And, again, about that organic nature, figuring out the champions, helping them be a part of the process, and not trying to apply a one-size-fits-all approach. Because that's just not going to be feasible from a change management standpoint, and you're always going to have those resistors. How can you be prepared for those as opposed to trying to think or trying to be overly optimistic? And I'm sure you've seen this with, hey, it's not the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. You've really gotta help them figure that out, and not just assume that they're going to figure it out on their own.
Absolutely.
So I think to me, it's all about balance and exactly what you kind of talked about, and I wrote it down, really that listening piece and understanding really where are they going to find value, where do they want to see that value, and how do you pull that thread through for what you want to achieve as an organization.
Yeah, and value is a kaleidoscope, right? Individual people value different things. Now that I'm a mom and my kids are teenagers, the value to me is time off, to be able to run around and play with them, where other people value financial things, other people value engagement with leadership. It all depends on the employees, so you have to meet them at those different levels. I have been to the field from Field of Dreams because my mother has an unhealthy obsession with Kevin Costner. I've also been to where they filmed Dance with Wolves as well. She has a problem.
I think one of the points too, what is successful, popular media would make us think we're all behind.
Right.
Like It makes us think that AI is everywhere, it's successful, it's amazing, it's been implemented so many successful times. That's not the reality, is it?
No, it's smoke and mirrors. So I would say that's even true about what we hear about mass layoffs around AI. I think a lot of that is a cover for regular reasons to lay off people. But the flip side of that is you're using that excuse to get a financial gain. You now have created an entire group of people who are terrified of the technology you're looking for them to adopt. So we really need to kind of get clear from a brand perspective about what AI is and what it means and how we want people to use it.
Danielle, I saw a hand go up.
You're sort of answering and ending my question thought. I think that there is all of this inherent anxiety from leadership around AI implementation, how far we are, do we understand it, without a real appreciation for the technology, for how to talk about the technology, and at the same time, within the organization, what are we doing? We're looking for grassroots examples of how AI every day is working and changing your life, and all of these kind of calls to action, yet those two things are still really disconnected for us. And I was thinking about the communications point, right? Like, how do we start to equalize that when the anxiety up here is so high and you have a variety of different levels of either adoption or understanding at the employee base level? I don't know. It's not a question. I'm sort of
No, I'm 100% with
processing
you.
through your
I also think
conversation.
our window of time to figure this out is collapsing quickly. If anyone has seen a commencement speech given lately, there's an entire generation that's about to graduate and go into the workflows who is completely against AI. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fear tactics that are related to it. So we really have a big messaging problem on our hand. I also believe that from the hype cycle perspective, we're in that trough of disillusionment right now. And AI will find its place, but it's not going to be everything. It reminds me of snake oil, right? It was the cure-all for absolutely everything. Yeah, Y2K, another great example. It isn't all-encompassing. It isn't gonna, tell you you're beautiful every day and do all of your work for you. But it does have a place. But I think it has a place in our internal architecture and systems the same way digital asset management has a place, and content management has a place, and CRMs have a place, right? It's gonna find its natural spot. We just need to give up this dream that it's gonna do absolutely everything for us.
Derek?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I think we all read the headlines with the big tech companies, and they are probably the most aggressive with AI and also laying off the most people with it.
Yes, ironically.
And it makes me wonder if some of the struggles with other companies and in the enterprise, they're thinking they can just copy what they're doing when these are tech companies that understand technology, and so it's maybe harder to adopt within your company. And so I was just curious, what your thoughts are there, that if some of the adoption is, or the output from the adoption is off the mark within companies that aren't maybe themselves tech companies and don't quite understand, how to get the most out of it.
Yeah, I think it's a question of both culture and perspective, right? Knowing your own culture, what's of value in that culture, finding how to marry this technology with that value. But I also think it's about having a focused perspective on what it was you want to do with this. So I was explaining to a colleague of mine the other day that it's similar to having someone come to your house. If you had someone come to your house to paint your house and you said, I want you to paint this house white, and they went, well, have you considered chartreuse? You would go, what is wrong with you? Just paint the house, right? But if I had an interior designer come into my house and said, well, I see you're doing mid-century modern, have you considered these other things? That's a different interaction that I'm having with that same skill set because I've asked for it, right? And so the perspective within organizations needs to be, how are we going to approach this integration of this new technology in a way that matches what my employees want and what their perspective is and how it can add value, as you said, to their lives.
Awesome. Nikki V, that's our last point, and then we're going to break.
Great point to end on.
I just want to kind of add on to your question point there, Derek. We see headlines for Amazon doing this, right? NVIDIA doing this. And Jessica brought this up the other day. I don't know who originally said it, but it's like, guy who owns hat business says, hats are booming, you know? Hats are the future. These places are heavily invested in this. AWS, you know, runs all of these servers. The graphic cards are what NVIDIA is pushing. So I do think that there is a little bit of like, why are we seeing all of this stuff from these big players too?
Absolutely. And as Monty Python said, the meaning of life is people are not wearing enough hats.
And with that,
Thank you.